I'm Reid Anderson from The Bad Plus, and you are watching 4BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching 4BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today on location from the Music Hall in Detroit before the show of The Bad Plus. And we are here with The Bad Plus bass player Reid Anderson. Hey Reid.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing great.
I'm so happy to meet you. I've wanted to see your band for a while. I know you've come through Detroit periodically, and circumstances were never such that I could make it, so I'm especially happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the show tonight. And welcome to Detroit. I hope you have a nice stay here.
Oh, yeah. It's always great to play here.
Boy, there's so much I want to ask you. The Bad Plus. First of all, where'd that name come from? I always liked the name.
Dave King actually made that up. It came out of just a desire to have a band identity. You know, that's kind of the driving ethos behind the Bad Plus is a very collective spirit and making group music, and jazz is so rife with this kind of leader mentality, and we really wanted to make a statement that was about group music and commitment to a band.
All right. I want to ask you more specifically about the music, but let's talk a little bit about you first. You're a bass player. You're from the Minnesota area, right?
Yes.
And I know you went to school at Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. Fill in some of the gaps for me. Tell me about your musical upbringing and how you became a bass player.
Well, I really got into music through just listening to rock radio in Minneapolis as a teenager, and being curious about what's out there. I was drawn to kind of progressive rock and played electric bass and garage bands, and that's in fact how I met Dave. We're both from the same suburb of Minneapolis, and yeah, then just through just general curiosity, I guess, kind of found my way to like more straight ahead jazz and avant-garde jazz, like Charles Mingus and Ornette Coleman and Charlie Haden, of course. He was a major inspiration for me to start playing acoustic.
I interviewed Charlie. We did a phone interview about, I don't know, a year or two before he died.
Yeah, well, Charlie was absolutely the greatest. I mean, him and Jimmy Garrison for me were the kind of the two guys that really drew me to the acoustic bass, and also not only that, but the kind of music that they were playing. Like Charlie with Ornette Coleman, or Keith Jarrett's American Quartet, the so-called American Quartet, or Jimmy Garrison, of course, with John Coltrane, and those guys really resonated with me. And
let's fill in some of those gaps, though, because most guys listening to rock music, they don't gravitate to the bass naturally. Most of them want to play guitar, or maybe drums, or maybe keyboard. What was it specifically about the bass that attracted you?
I think it's hard to say. I think initially when I was a young kid interested in playing music, I did want to play guitar, but just more and more of the music I was listening to, the bass just spoke to me, and the function of it within the music, and I don't know. One day I announced to my parents that I wanted to play the bass, and I remember them being really concerned because they thought that I wouldn't be happy playing an instrument that I couldn't play by myself.
Well, before you discovered Charlie Haden and Jimmy Garrison and the jazz guys, did you have any musical influences in the rock area on the electric bass?
Oh yeah, I mean Geddy Lee, of course, and John Paul Jones and Sting, and like Tony Levin, just so many great, Jocko, of course. But yeah, I was Chris Squire. I was into as a teenager, I really loved progressive rock, and just kind of that was my. I think a lot of that information has stayed with me. I still enjoy that music and the creative spirit, the exploration of that music.
Like when you're in the car, you'd put on the classic rock station, maybe?
Sure, of course. Yeah, why not? Who doesn't like classic rock?
How much electric bass are you playing these days?
I basically don't play electric bass. I own a P bass that I got a couple years ago, and in fact, Dave and I and the keyboardist Craig Taborn have just recorded a record on which I play electric bass. A band called Golden Valley is now, but that's the only instance that I've played electric bass in the last 30 years.
A lot easier to cart around, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Let's talk about the band, the Bad Plus, because it's kind of hard to pigeonhole what you play. You could call it avant-garde jazz, or you could talk about some of the covers that you've done with everybody's music, from Blondie to Black Sabbath to David Bowie to Stravinsky. Who are you people? I mean, how would you describe the band and the music of the Bad Plus?
Well, like I was saying before, the main thing about the Bad Plus is that it's a collective organization. It's a place where everybody gets to come in and be themselves and bring whatever influences that they have. And we're not, we share a lot of the same things, but we're definitely, interested in different things as well. And we're all three of us are composers, and we strive to have a, create a group sound out of three distinct personalities, really. I think that one thing from the outset that we were very intent upon was to be honest about our own life experience and to bring that into improvisational music. That we weren't trying to pretend that we didn't grow up listening to rock radio and stuff like that. And we also felt like it was just important to have a dialogue with contemporary popular music, not only sort of explicitly in doing the cover tunes that we did, but also just how it informs our own writing, and those elements are kind of there without any apology. But also, just being interested in complex emotions and the avant-garde, and it's a pretty, like you say, it's hard even for us to articulate after all these years. It's not, we don't have a clear, succinct statement that defines the band.
Okay. When you have three people that work so closely together for so long, you had a personnel change about a year ago when you brought in Oren as the new keyboard player. Mm-hmm. That seems to have worked out very well, but that must have been an abrupt transition.
Well, it wasn't exactly abrupt. I mean, we definitely saw it coming a few years, for years, let's say. But in a way, it's been a very smooth transition and a very invigorating one as well.
Right. Well, maybe abrupt isn't the right word, but it's kind of a jolt when you're with somebody for, 15, 16, 17 years. Well, no, since you've been recording, you've been together since...
18 years. I'd say 18 years, yeah. I mean, it's, we're really proud of the music that we made with Ethan, and but it was time for him to move on and do some other things, and Dave and I felt very differently about it. And Oren's a great friend that I've known since 1991.
From Philly, right?
From Philly.
Did he go to Curtis too? Is that where you met?
No, but that's at the time I was there. That's when I met him. And he was somebody that Dave and I had always talked about, just kind of anticipating maybe in a way this kind of a situation, and he was just the guy that we wanted to play with.
Yeah. Philly has such an incredibly rich musical heritage. I want to ask you a little bit about your technique. When you started on the upright bass, you'd already been playing electric, but I mean, did you get into the, Samandal and the bow and all that kind of stuff?
I did. When I initially started playing the upright bass, my intention was not to play any classical music, but circumstances put me in that position. I spent a year at the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire, and in order to be a music major, you had to be in the orchestra. Okay. And my teacher there was a professional orchestral bass player. He was in the Minnesota Orchestra. and he was a really good teacher. And I picked it up quickly, and he said pretty early on, I think you could get into Curtis if you wanted to. And I just sort of made it my goal to get into Curtis, which is, it's a very small school, and you have to audition to get in, and it's everyone there is on full scholarship. It's a very, it's a real heavy classical institution. So I managed to pull that off, and so I have that's my music education really, is in classical music.
Oh, okay. So you went through the repertoire, you played all the orchestral stuff, and
I did
French bow or German bow?
French. At the time, I don't know if it's changed, but at the time you had to play French bow to go to Curtis.
Really?
Yeah.
I just can't get. Every time I pick up a French bow, I hold it like a German bow, and people laugh at me. But
it's easier to hold a German bow like a French bow than it is to hold a French bow like a German bow. Yeah.
All right.
That's my advice to you.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me a little bit about your gear. What kind of basses you play, strings, amps, things like that.
My personal bass, I only have one bass. It's a Juzek from the 1930s. Mm-hmm. It's in great condition. It's just a great, very functional bass. I wouldn't say it's particularly special or anything like that, but it is a good instrument, and I've had it a long time.
Good workhorse.
It's a workhorse, yeah. And strings. I used to play with a full set of Vikes, Spyrocore Vikes, but a couple years ago I switched to having Gamut gut strings on the D and G, and I've really been so happy about it. For a lot of guys, they go through a lot of different strings, and I did a long time ago. I was experimenting with a lot of stuff, but I don't have time or energy to really go through that.
Yeah, and it can get expensive to experiment with strings, especially for the upright bass.
Yeah, but for me, the guts really work in terms of my own aesthetic, and for what I want to get out of them. I find with the steel strings on the D and G, you just have to work a little too hard to get the sound that you want, where with the guts, for me, the sound is just there.
What kind of pickup do you have on your bass?
I have a full circle, a Fishman full circle, but I'm not that fussy. Between the realist and the full circle, it's both are great.
The realist, David Gage realist.
Yeah, the David Gage realist.
Yeah. So you have that also?
I actually travel with one because I don't travel with my bass, and just in case the pickup isn't working, or maybe the bass doesn't have a pickup, I would just throw that on.
Okay. And I think I saw an Eden amp on the stage. Is that right?
Yeah, that's another rider item. I do. That's my first choice. I like the Eden amps and speakers. But if they don't have that, I'll make it work. I also like Ampeg and SWR, and I'm not particularly picky about the amps. It's just if it amplifies the bass, I don't. The amp isn't really there to be overly loud. It's just kind of just to support the sound. And
what about the future? What else is in store? You're in the middle of a tour right now, and you've been doing this for a long time. The new band has gelled. Can I call it the new band, the new grouping? So what lies ahead for you and for the Bad Plus?
Well, I mean, this has been a tremendous year of, Oren joining the band, and like I said, a really positive energy for all of us. And, I guess the next step is just to keep writing new music and evolving our musical relationship, and continuing on with various other projects. Like, there's another band called Broken Shadows that Dave and I both play in, plays the repertoire of more or less composers from Fort Worth, Texas, like Ornette Coleman and Julius Hemphill and Dewey Redman, and we do some Charlie Haden stuff as well. And then
I was thinking of Charlie's name in the background when you mentioned those.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, he's the kind of in a way, the core of that sound. He's such a. I think the thing about Charlie Haden is he's so underappreciated. In the sense of, like, you talk about Ornette Coleman, but Ornette Coleman without Charlie Haden is a completely different thing from Ornette Coleman with a different bass player, or the Keith Jarrett Quartet as two examples of like two really important groups, and it's just like, man, like the contributions that he made harmonically and in terms of sound, they cannot be underestimated as far as how they affected that music specifically.
Yeah. Fascinating talking to him, and he had some very strong political opinions as well that I didn't ask him about, but he brought them up. But check out the interview on ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Put in Charlie Haden in the search thing, and you can read the whole thing. Yeah. Let me ask you one more question, Reid. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine, what would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
Oh, my goodness. There was a time when I thought I wanted to be in the visual arts, like a painter. But I never really painted. I painted like two things and then decided that maybe music was a better place to put my energy.
Okay. Well, it seems to have worked out just fine, so keep playing the bass and keep making music. Well, really looking forward to the show. Reid Anderson from the Bad Plus, thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing. You've been a very prolific band also, and we look forward to, you don't seem to have any shortage of coming up with new thoughts, new ideas, new musical compositions, and we look forward to what you and the other guys keep continuing to put out. We'll all enjoy them. So thanks very much. On location at the Music Hall in Detroit with Reid Anderson from the Bad Plus. I'm John Liebman. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com.